Nothing's quite as versatile as Pyrex. Straight from the freezer to the oven. Nothing the problems of Pyrex.
There was a saying when I worked at Pyrex that every household in Sunderland, some family member had worked at Pyrex over the years.
If anybody asks me what's the main thing that you appreciated about working at Pyrex, I would say the workforce, both management and subordinates.
There's pride in this job, pride in a quality product, pride in a good day's production.
I think I pulled the hooter. I pulled that when the last piece of glass came off. I went up through the process line. That was it. 100 and odd years of history gone in on blow.
We cleaned up and we disappeared and we met up at the night time and we celebrated. But it was it was heartbreaking. Still is today, never forget it. Never ever.
The first record of glass being crafted in Britain was actually in 674 AD. Benedict Bishop, who was the founder of the Monk Wearmouth Jarrow Priory, of which St Peter's on the banks of the River Wear was a part, got glaziers from France and Rome to make some stained glass windows, but glassmaking was really time consuming and very expensive, so there was a huge gap before glassmaking started on Wearside in earnest. By the 1800s, Sunderland had 7 bottle works and 3 glass works, the largest of which was James Hartley's Weir Flint Glass Works, and that's the company that would eventually go on to produce Pyrex, after Greeners took it over and then eventually Joblin's. But like a lot of businesses after the First World War, they were really struggling, and so the nephew of James A. Joblin, Ernest Joblin Purser, decided to leap on a new opportunity, a new technique that he'd heard about in America, which was Pyrex.
With Pyrex being such a big plant and a household name, somebody always knew somebody who worked at Pyrex, of which it was never ever called Pyrex, because Pyrex was the brand name of the glass. It was either James A. Joblin, or then became Cornan, and then Newell, and then Arc. But it was known as Pyrex.
About 1963, watching the television on an afternoon on holidays, and there was a film about scientific glassblowers. And my dad got home after work, said, "Oh, I've seen a really interesting job, scientific glassblowing." He said, "Oh, well," they said, "Pyrex, that's where they do it." It's Pyrex. So sent a letter in, saying if there were any vacancies. Lo and behold, I got a job as a scientific glassblower apprentice.
When I was 15, I decided I'd like a job. So I applied to Pyrex and 1 or 2 other places to see if there was any jobs. I'd heard of a scientific glassblower through my dad. He'd worked at Pyrex a few years before, but I didn't really know what it was. So I applied, got an interview, got another interview, and got the job, not really knowing exactly what it was about.
I did start that with my twin brother, who was also an engineering apprentice, and that was a result of a campaign by my father, who worked at Pyrex, to get me an apprenticeship. Because when I left school, I just wanted to be a mechanic. My father said, no, you're not going to be a mechanic.
There were females employed, mainly on applying the transfers for the designs. I don't recall seeing any female engineers or certainly not glassblowers. and obviously the admin staff, the technical staff, there was more ladies than men in the chemical labs and the physics labs. I think there was only a couple of ladies there. I used to get actually very, very good cooperation from the men, far better than either of my bosses ever did. Because obviously I was a girl, and what was I doing there, and got a few wolf whistles.
Well, I was out of work for a short while, and one of my friends was working at the factory as a packer on a temporary contract. He was a tradesman, a painter and decorator, and he got a job offer, and he told me, and I walked into the factory, and the fellow who picked us up at the gate happened to be the personnel manager. So I asked us why I was there. I told him the story. He says, well, I'm going to personnel now. He says, do you want to walk up? And he just had some small talk on the way up about cycling. And he was a keen cyclist, and so was I. So by the time we got the personnel office, he told us who he was, and I virtually had a short-term contract to start on a night shift.
When I started off, I was just a labourer. The job was to make sure the floor was tidy and make sure the glass was emptied all the time going through. And then we had to layer those, so the machine would make the glass, and sometimes we couldn't use like a special, we call it takeout, to take the glass, transfer it onto the bells, so you had to do it by hand. So you had loads of heat, we were there for a quarter of an hour till you get relieved. So that was it. And then I remember the lad who, Charlie Morris, God rest his soul, he took us under his wing and he explained to us what to do if you want to become a machine minder. He says, the best thing to do is make sure you're in for early shift, because half them sleep in. So I said, oh, that'll do. So that's what I did, and then I went on to become an operator, then a charge hand supervisor, and then eventually day shift superintendent.
I remember when I started, somebody asked me, did my mother and father work there? Because there were so many people, the whole family worked there. I was surprised that I didn't have anybody, I didn't have a member of family that worked there.
Well, when you started, you were in like what was called a training school. So there might have been 4 or 5 of us started on the same day. We were in there for 6 months, and you were doing like all the basic, techniques, which was like pulling points, blowing test tubes.
And in about 6 weeks, I thought, that looks easy, I can do that. And then one day he got up and he says, right, you have a go, I'm going for my break. And found out how difficult it was.
Once we were getting over doing that, and you had your own bench, after the 6 months you had a bench in the factory, that's when you got little jobs out and you were doing them like from start to finish.
I used to photograph visiting dignitaries, which was always scary in case you screwed it up, which I did on more than one occasion. Photographing the directors' passports, photographing scenes of accidents within the factory, photographing installations of new things, but what I always felt was the most exciting bit was there were 5 tanks, and on a rota they were let out for maintenance, and they used to cool them down, and then you used to go inside and take photographs of the inside of the glass tank. And you would go in and you'd be standing on solid glass. Sometimes they drained them, so it was just a surface of glass. Sometimes they didn't, so it was quite a depth of glass, which was still hot. So you were moving your feet all the time because of the heat.
This rectangular area was the blownware factory, and the associated trades were around here. Production engineering machine shop, steel erectors, joiners, bricklayers. This was the canteen area. This was the technical block, and this here is the Deptford site in its infancy. What we built over there was a main packing area, and the laboratory factory ended up down there as well.
The first contract was packing on night shift. It wasn't at the main site, it was at the decorating centre, which was underneath Alexandra Bridge. It's where they done all the decorating and packing into big sets. And it was down there on our first night we learned how to pack measure jugs and stuff like that. It was a skeleton crew, so it was probably 10 of us started and there were 10 permanent employees working the decorating machines. And after a short while, they got a lot of orders in for tableware we used to make, and they decided they need a full-time night shift. I met some great people down there, and the managers, they called them superintendents at the time, took us under his wing because I was asking a lot of questions. I'd never been involved in anything like that before, and a couple of the guys who started with us were tradesmen, and they probably thought that they knew it all, and they weren't asking any questions, and I was asking lots of questions, keen to learn, and I was offered the charge hand's job at that time. And that, in my whole career at Pyrex, that was my favourite ever job.
When I first started there in 1974, it was brilliant. Honest, the people were great. I mean, we used to call the ladies, well, if you want to call them women, but they used to work what they called pin money. The husbands used to work in the shipyards and things like that, but you were decorators. Decorate all the glass, and used to work every 4 hours, 6 in the morning till 10, 10 till 2, 2 till 6, 6 till 10. And you used to have good laugh with them, a bit fun. It was just characters, but it was like a family affair. Everybody was happy. There was needless arguments. Everybody helped each other, and it was great. Great to work there.
I loved working at Pyrex. The social side of it was really good. The fact that they sent you to college and they would support you, however far you wanted to go. 1966, the World Cup, and I missed the World Cup because I was up in Scotland doing it with bounce course for 4 weeks. But I loved working at Pyrex.
There was often a bit of blood around because obviously glassworks, as things break and people get cut. And there was one incident I was called down to take a photograph of some sort of cutting machine. It came down like that and did something, I don't know what, but it had come down on somebody's finger. And the finger was still there, and I had to photograph it. I mean, not that it was anything particularly gory, but all the men stood and watched to see what I was going to do, which was, I determined I wasn't going to bat an eyelid about it.
My father worked there. I had the fortune or misfortune to be my father's boss. Which I suppose I got some of me own back from being disciplined in the house again. My father disciplined at work.
The problem was, it was that noisy. You have to learn how to liberate or take people off the job to find out. There was a lot of sign language, and that means go and get us a new mould, 2 moulds. Buddy, like we used to call them moulds, with the glass went in.
I used to go in and train the apprentices early in the morning just for a couple of hours. And this young apprentice, we used to make glass pipettes. It was an apprentice's job, making glass pipettes. And what he'd done, young lad, don't know why, he filled this pipette with water, sealed both ends, and then decided to warm the whole thing up. So he's sitting in the training school, decided to warm this up. There's glass windows behind me, right, or behind him, and the thing exploded. And chance in a million, it missed him. But there was bullet holes, about 6 bullet holes in the glass windows behind him, which were there till the factory closed down. But luckily, how he got away with it, the whole lot missed him.
In the next few minutes, you'll be seeing a tape of the visit of President Carter and Prime Minister Callaghan to Corning Limited, our facilities in Sunderland in the northeast of England.
We didn't see him. We were working, and we didn't know whether he was going to come down to the factory where we were, so we couldn't go up and see him. We had to be at work.
It's like any factory in the world does, you get the paint out and start snapping it all over the place. But because it was President Carter, one of the strangest things was, at the time, where the factory was, it was amongst some old rows of cottages, right? And they thought, well, that's not a very good backdrop to a president who was going to do it. So they got some of the transport out and put some screens up, so with Pyrex on them, whatever. So you couldn't see these. Some of them were direct, to be fair,
Lots of scientific glass blowers or apprentice glass blowers. During their break time, at dinner time, they would sit down and just mess about making glass animals. which was very basic glass animals, and that's what we're doing. Somebody must have noticed that I was fairly good at this.
On the top of the buildings there was like, the Secret Service or whatever they're called, with the guns and that.
There was times when certain bodyguards would say, "You're not allowed to walk along here," and they had them on vantage points and all over the place. And when he turned up, it was like cheering, and people who just couldn't get close enough to see this president of the United States in the factory, and it was like, yeah, the president's been to Pyrex. It was a great feeling,
They said, well, straight out, President Carter was coming from America. We need you to think of an idea of something to make for him, which I thought was something to do with Britain, George and the Dragon. And then there was other tap on the shoulder, "Oh, you're going to present it to him as well," which was obviously that was like a big thing for me to meet the President Carter, the President of America. Had to buy a suit, right? First time I'd worn a suit since I was a kid. Did a little interview on television, and then it was just hanging about for about 2 hours waiting for President Carter to arrive. And then when he did arrive, of course, there was a huge crowd there, huge crowd, and everybody went wild, and I spent about 10 minutes with him, and then he did the tour of the factory, and he came out and he said, "Bye, thank you very much," and that was over. When my mother and father died, and they had all this stuff they had kept, I hadn't bothered, and they'd kept it all. So they're obviously very proud of it.
Well, this is it. This is the last day of production. Come in the office, same time as normal. And here it is, 28th of September 2007. The last day of manufacturing of Pyrex in Sunderland and the UK. I wouldn't say it was expected. I think if you walked about with your head in the sand over the